Immortality, the Council has always believed, is the prerogative of the worthy. A throne is only as old as the one who sits it. The Undying, our sovereign eternal, has held the crown of the Othrani for 11,400 years, and in all that time, we have never doubted the single iron law of power, that a people is the shadow of one great being, and that to break the being is to break the shadow. This is the law that built our dominion. This is the law that, for 400 years, lost us a war we should have won in a season. I want you to look at the footage. The first clip was pulled from a melted relay buried under the rubble of the human fortress world they called Severin's Hold. It is 19 seconds long. A man stands on a broken parapet while the sky above him burns orange with the fires of our orbital lances. He is not running. He lifts a small object to the watching soldiers below, a dented metal cup, a field vessel of the cheapest kind, and he says something the audio does not preserve, and they roar back at him. The timestamp on the relay places this in the 402nd year of the war. The second clip is identical in every way that matters. The same parapet, the same posture, the same cup raised in the same scarred hand, the same notch above the left brow, the roar of the same soldiers. Only the timestamp is different. The second clip predates the first by 4,011 years. I have reviewed both recordings more than 400 times. The face does not age. The cup does not change. And so the Council reached the only conclusion our law permits. The humans, like us, are ruled by one deathless individual. The sovereign of humanity is immortal, and if we wish to win, we must learn how he was made and how he can be unmade. We were wrong about every word of that sentence. Before I show you how wrong, let me take you back to the beginning of the thing we feared, 4,000 years before we ever knew its name. Worthiness in our histories is the parent of permanence. We assume the human sovereign endured because he was exceptional, a war god, a chosen one, an engineered apex bred for the throne the way our Undying was bred for his. Every scholar in the repository began his study looking for the gene vault, the consciousness lattice, the secret laboratory where humanity grew its eternal king. There is none. I have searched the captured archives down to the marrow. No immortality treatment exists in the human record. No clone line, no memory transfer, no body vault. The sovereign of humanity was not manufactured. He was, at the start, an accident of paperwork. The earliest record names him Jonah Webb, and he was not a king. He was a supply officer, a man whose entire authority consisted of counting crates of ammunition and deciding which starving district received bread first. When the first Othrani fleets fell on the human worlds, their true leaders died in the opening hours, as leaders do. Webb survived because no one bothers to bomb a man counting crates. The survivors needed someone to sign the orders. He was standing nearest the desk. Consider how absurd this is by the measure of our own court. Imagine, Council, that our Undying fell and the crown passed not to a bred successor, but to whichever clerk happened to be carrying a ledger past the throne room when the blow landed. We would call it the collapse of civilization. The humans called it Tuesday. Webb signed the orders. He kept the bread moving. He did the unglamorous arithmetic of survival, and because he did it without dying for 3 years, the soldiers began to call him the sovereign, half in mockery, half in something that was not mockery at all. I find it telling that our doctrine demanded he be a god, when the records insist he was a frightened logistician with bad knees, and a cup he drank cold tea from because he had no time to heat it. We were looking for the source of his power in his blood. It was never in his blood. It was in the ledger, and in the cup, and in the simple refusal of an ordinary man to put down a job nobody else wanted. That refusal is the seed of everything. Watch how it grows. To understand why we hunted this man for 4 centuries, you must understand the one who did the hunting. The Undying has reigned over the Othrani since before humanity learned to smelt iron. He is the oldest continuous fact in the galaxy. His will is not interrupted by death, by succession, by the slow forgetting that erodes lesser dynasties. He remembers the founding of our dominion the way you remember yesterday. He has never lost an enemy he set his mind to ending because no enemy outlives him. They die. He remains. That is the whole of his philosophy, and for 11,000 years it has never failed. When the report of an immortal human leader first reached the eternal throne, the Undying was not afraid. He was delighted. Here at last was a worthy thing, another deathless sovereign, a true rival, a being that might give his endless patience something to push against. He took personal command of the human war, the first campaign he had directed himself in 2,000 years. He did not want generals between himself and a fellow immortal. This was to be a duel of crowns. And so the deathless emperor met the deathless king, and the duel went exactly as the Undying expected, and exactly as it should have, except in one detail that drove him slowly out of his mind. He could kill the sovereign of humanity. He did so again and again. What he could not do was make the death stay. Here is the shape of the thing, and I ask the council to sit with how strange it is. Our Undying cannot be killed, and so he believes he cannot be beaten. The sovereign of humanity could be killed with insulting ease, and could not be beaten for the very same reason the Undying could not. One was permanent because nothing could end him. The other was permanent because ending him changed nothing at all. They were mirror images, and the Undying hated the mirror, because in it he saw that his great gift, his deathlessness, might not be the rarest thing in the universe after all. He killed the sovereign for the first time in the 9th year of the war. Let me show you what that victory bought him. The strike was, by every measure of our craft, perfect. Our agents spent 2 years mapping the human command structure to locate the immortal at its apex. They found him on a forward world in the open, raising that same cheap cup to the same roaring soldiers. A single lance from orbit reduced the parapet, and everyone on it to vapor. We recovered enough biological residue to confirm the kill against the genetic profile in our files. The sovereign of humanity was dead. The Dominion declared a festival. The Undying allowed himself, the records say, a rare moment of satisfaction. The mirror was shattered. The duel was won. 23 days later. The same standard rose over the same wall on the same world. The same cup, raised in the same scarred hand. The same notch above the brow. The soldiers roared as if nothing had happened because to them nothing had. Our analysts assumed a clone, a double, a propaganda trick. They were partly right and entirely wrong, and the difference between those two things is the whole of this lecture. We killed him again in the 14th year. He returned in 30 days. We killed him in the 21st year, the 33rd, the 58th. Each death was real. Our instruments do not lie about residue. And each time, after a delay measured in weeks, the sovereign of humanity walked back onto the wall and lifted his cup. The treatises from this period make for humbling reading. The Vessel Codices, 400 volumes of theology produced by the repository's finest minds, concluded that the cup itself was the seat of the immortality, a relic that reconstituted its bearer from death. We assigned a battle fleet to the single objective of capturing the vessel of sovereignty. We lost the fleet. We did not get the cup. We had built an entire science around a dented mug, because our law could not permit the truth, that we kept killing the right man, and that the right man was never the point. The Undying stopped declaring festivals. He began, for the first time in his endless life, to feel the thing his subjects feel and he never had. He began to feel time. And time, when you have always had infinite quantities of it, is a horror you have no defense against. I will not pretend the war was kind to the humans. Our doctrine insists that an immortal protects his people, that the worthy king shields the unworthy mass. So let me strip that comfort away too, because the cruelest stretch of the record gives it no support at all. There is a span of 91 years our archives call the Long Wound, when our fleets ground the human frontier nearly to dust. In that period, the office of sovereign changed hands more than 200 times. 200. Some bearers held the cup for a decade. Some held it for 4 days before a lance found them. We have the casualty manifests. We have the faces. They are not the faces of war gods. They are the faces of a teacher, a dock worker, a field medic, a woman who repaired water reclaimers, each of them ordinary past the point of insult, each of them dead inside a season, each of them replaced before the body cooled. Our scholars, still bound by the single immortal law, recorded every one of these as the same man in disguise. When the footage clearly showed a woman lifting the cup, and it did, many times the repository ruled it a deliberate human deception, a body double meant to confuse our targeting. The name attached to one such recording is Mara Donnelly. We logged her as a fraud, a mask worn by the true immortal hiding elsewhere. She was not a mask. She was the sovereign of humanity, completely and without qualification, for the 11 days she survived. We simply could not see her, because our eyes were the wrong shape. What I cannot find in any human record of the long wound is hesitation. The office never lapsed. Not once in 91 years did the cup go unraised for longer than it took to find the next pair of hands. People walked toward a thing that had killed 200 of their predecessors, and they picked it up, and they died, and someone else picked it up, and I have read every word of it, and I still do not have a clean explanation for why. I have only the fact. They kept doing it. They are still doing it. The doing is the whole of what they are. Hold that fact. We are about to learn what it was attached to. The truth broke open by accident, the way most truths do, when a raiding party recovered a human administrative protocol intact. Not a battle plan, not a weapon schematic, but a procedure document of crushing, beautiful tedium. It described the office of sovereign in the plain language of a job description. The sovereign is not a person. The sovereign is a sworn role, a mask, a cup, an oath, and a chain of succession. Any human who has taken the oath of continuance may become the sovereign within hours of the previous bearer's death. The face we feared was a face anyone could wear. The immortality we hunted was the immortality of an office, which does not bleed because it was never alive. I want to be precise about how completely this dismantled our science. We had assumed the sovereign endured the way our undying endures, one body, preserved against time. The human sovereign endured the way a river endures. The water is never the same water. The river never stops being the river. We had spent 400 years trying to assassinate a river by shooting at individual cups of water and recording, each time with great satisfaction, that the water was now dead. The cup, our sacred vessel, the object of 400 volumes of theology, was the simplest part of the deception, and it was not even a deception. It was a literal cup. The human protocol noted in a maintenance subsection that the vessel of office had been re-rimmed, resoldered, and rebottomed 241 times across its service life, and that bearers were encouraged but not required to keep it. It was passed down because it was passed down. It meant immortality to us. To them, it meant only that the last person who held this job also got thirsty. And here the mirror finally turned and showed us a face we had refused to look at. Our undying is one being who cannot die. Their sovereign is every being who has agreed to. We worshipped the singular and feared its loss. They distributed the singular until losing it became impossible. The most precious thing in our civilization, the irreplaceable one at the center, was the exact thing the humans had decided no one would ever be. Strip away the myth of the great king, and you are left with a question no song will answer. How does a role outlive a person? Power, in our understanding, is a thing you hold. You cannot hand grief or memory or the weight of a crown from one set of hands to another the way you hand over a cup. And yet they did. The machinery of how they did it is the least romantic and most important thing in this entire account. There was no palace. There was no treasury, no royal bloodline, no sacred city for us to burn. The office of sovereign owned nothing and lived nowhere. What it had instead was a distributed succession. At any moment, scattered across 100 worlds, thousands of ordinary humans had already taken the oath of continuance and already knew the order in which they would be called. A schoolteacher on one world knew she was 400th in line and thought of it perhaps twice a year. A man named Thomas Greer, a bridge inspector, was ninth in line for 11 years and never told his family. When the call came, it came as a message. And the new sovereign put down whatever they were holding and picked up the cup and walked to the wall, often within the hour. We could not bomb this. You cannot lance a list. We tried to capture the succession registry and discovered there was no single registry. Every world held its own fragment, and any fragment could regrow the whole, the way a cutting regrows the plant. We had spent 4 centuries hunting the head of a thing that had deliberately, methodically, generation by generation, arranged to have no head. I confess this is where my own analogies failed me, and I want the council to see them fail because the failure is instructive. I kept asking the archive, who is the true sovereign? The way one asks, who is the true undying? There is only ever one true undying. The archive returned every time the same maddening answer. The true sovereign is whoever is holding the cup. And when I asked who that was, the answer was always, it depends what hour you mean. We were not fighting a person. We had never been fighting a person. We were fighting a verb that the humans had agreed to keep conjugating forever, and a verb has no throat to cut. In the 406th year of the war, we did at last take a sovereign of humanity alive. His name was Caleb Mercer. He was, by human reckoning, young, not a warrior, not a statesman, a hydroponics technician who had been 93rd in line until a very bad week moved him to first. Our boarding teams expected to fight their way to him through a god's bodyguard. They found him in a maintenance corridor, holding the cup, shaking so hard he could barely keep his feet. He did not resist. He asked only that they not damage the vessel because, he said, someone would need it after him. The Undying chose to interrogate him personally. After 400 years and unnumbered deaths, the deathless emperor would finally stand face to face with the immortal who had defied him. I was permitted to record the session. I have transcribed every word, and I will give the council only the part that matters. The Undying asked him how it felt to be unkillable. Mercer, the transcript reads, looked confused. He said he was not unkillable. He said he expected to be dead within the week, and that this was normal, and that he had made his peace with it when he took the oath. The Undying pressed him. Surely he, the sovereign, the immortal, understood that he had reigned 4,000 years. And Mercer said the thing that I believe ended the war, though no weapon was fired when he said it. He said, I haven't reigned 4,000 years. I've held this for 9 days. The sovereign has reigned 4,000 years. I'm just the part of it that's awake right now. The Undying did not understand. I watched him not understand. He had captured, he believed, the most important being in the human universe, and the being kept insisting he was no one in particular, and meant it, and was right. The emperor had spent 4 centuries trying to take the one piece off the board that would end the game. He finally held that piece in his hand, and discovered it was a piece any human could be, which meant it was no piece at all, which meant he held everything and nothing in the same trembling young man. He had caught the river did not stop. A conqueror requires a defeated thing to display. This is the oldest rule of our triumphs. You parade the broken king, you mount the head, you extract the surrender from the one mouth whose word binds the rest. The Undying has performed this rite 1,000 times across 11,000 years. It is how a war becomes a victory. He could not perform it. There was no king to break, because the king was an office, and the office does not flinch. There was no head to mount that would not simply be replaced by mourning. There was no single mouth whose surrender bound humanity, because the humans had spent 4,000 years guaranteeing that no such mouth would ever exist. The Undying could kill Caleb Mercer in front of the cameras, and the 94th in line would take the oath before the broadcast ended, and the war would continue with a new face and the same cup, and the only thing the execution would prove is that the Undying had not understood the war he was fighting. I was the one ordered to draft the strategic assessment. I will read the council the single sentence that mattered, the sentence that closed the campaign. I wrote, "We have not been losing battles. We have been fighting a verb, and one does not defeat a verb by killing the nouns that happen to be conjugating it. The Dominion withdrew. Not in defeat, we were careful in our records never to write the word defeat. We withdrew because the war had no achievable end state. You cannot win a contest of permanence against an enemy that has made itself more permanent than you, by the simple, unbearable trick of refusing to be any one thing you could destroy. The Undying had entered the war seeking a worthy, immortal rival. He found one. He simply could not stand to look at what immortality, in the human's hands, had turned out to mean. We had aimed 400 years of fire at a person who never existed. The sovereign of humanity was real. He had simply never once been a he or a she or a who. He was a yes, the answer thousands of ordinary people kept giving to a question that should have terrified them and somehow didn't. We released Caleb Mercer. There was no reason to keep him. A worthless prisoner, our doctrine said, a temporary clerk holding a temporary mask. They let him walk back across the line with the cup still in his hands. He did not die that week, as it happened. He held the office for 2 more years, longer than most, and then he handed the cup to the 94th in line, a woman whose name our records do not preserve, which is the most fitting thing about her, and he went back to growing food and water, and he was, from that day, no one again. The cup went with the office. I am told it was resoldered shortly after, the 242nd time, because Mercer had dented it against the wall the night Severin's hold fell, raising it to soldiers who roared back at him as if he were eternal, which, in the only way that counted, he was. The footage that opened this account, the man on the burning parapet, 4,000 years apart, the same cup in the same scarred hand, was never one man. It was the office, photographed across 40 centuries, wearing whatever face was awake that day. The scar was the second most common injury among bearers. The notch above the brow was where the cup struck the forehead during the oath. We mistook a ritual for a bloodline. We mistook a habit for a god. I will leave the council with the image I cannot stop seeing. Our Undying sits, this hour, on the eternal throne, as he has for 11,400 years, the single irreplaceable fact at the center of our civilization. The one being we cannot afford to lose. And somewhere across the line, a woman whose name no one recorded is drinking cold tea from a dented cup, and she is the sovereign of humanity. And if she dies tonight, it will not matter at all, and that is precisely why she cannot be beaten. We built our strength around a being who must never die. They built theirs around the agreement that anyone may. I have spent my life believing the first was the higher thing. I am no longer certain. So I put the question to this council, the only question this war ever truly asked, and I will not pretend to answer it for you. Which is the immortal one, the king who cannot die, or the people who have decided that no single one of them needs to?